My given name. I was thinking. Listen up. The soap you shower with, it's you probably haven't even questioned what bar of soap you lather.
Hey guys, welcome to Hip Hughes History. My name is Mr. Hughes, and Noam Chomsky and I, we deliver the learning through the YouTubes. Tonight we're going to do Election for Dummies 1912. And you ain't no dummy. You're exactly where you're supposed to be right now, learning. Whether you're here because you're in an AP government course, a political science, a United States history course, maybe you just like learning, maybe you cray. It really doesn't matter because I'm wearing pajama bottoms and I'm about to serve up some learning. I hope you're hungry. Ding dong, here we go. All right, I really love the election of 1912. First of all, let's set the very basics up, and you can see the Electoral College up there, at least the electoral map, and it looks like a landslide. It looks like Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, just kicks some behind. But when you actually break this up, you're going to find out that Woodrow Wilson only won about 41, 42% of the electoral vote. So this is a really great election if you're studying the idea of the electoral kind of system being indirect democracy and really not representing the will of the people per se. But we have 4 people that are running for president, which makes this even more interesting. So we're going to break this up in a minute, looking at each candidate, and then we'll look at a little bit of their policies, not too much, but definitely the outcome, and kind of gear this towards the political science ideas. So let's just get them up in order here. We're going to do it. It doesn't really matter what order. I can do whatever I want. Let's start with Howard Taft, and then we'll move on to Teddy Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, and I can't forget my little friend Eugene Debs. So here we go. Let's line them up and knock them down one at a time. Well, I started with Taft because he's the incumbent, but you wouldn't know that looking at his dismal third-place finish. He really had bad luck in this election, I would say. His vice presidential candidate died like a month before the election in November, and that kind of sucked. And he was heard complaining the whole election that he knew he was going to lose and that he felt like nobody loved him. Howard Taft is a Republican, but he is on the factional side of the conservative side of the Republican Party. You have to remember that political parties are bands of factions, of kind of groups that share some interest. And on one hand, you have a conservative faction, which are generally to be considered more pro-business, wouldn't be as friendly maybe back then to the environment, favor higher tariffs because tariffs are generally seen as pro-manufacturer, and this is Howard Taft. Now, Howard Taft was the vice president, remember, he's the president, was the vice president of our second guy, might as well just line them up in a row, and that's Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was president from 1901 to 1908. He served out William McKinley's term after William McKinley was assassinated in my town, Buffalo, New York, and he went on to serve his second term. He is the author of The Square Deal. He's a progressive Republican, and a progressive Republican is a Republican that believes that the government has a role in modulating kind of the relationship between business and labor. So Teddy Roosevelt's positions are going to be different than some conservative Republicans, like his vice president, Howard Taft. All right, on the Democratic side, we have Governor of New Jersey, Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, former president of Princeton University, is going to defeat, I think it's Champ Smith, who was the Speaker of the House back then. Really with the support of William Jennings Bryan. I believe it went to like 46 calls and voting for the convention, and eventually William Jennings Bryan throws his support to Woodrow Wilson after Champ Smith gains the support of the Wall Street crowd. That's always been contentious to the Democratic Party, the pro-business Democrats and the more kind of populist Democrats. But we don't want to get stuck in the weeds, so we have our Democratic nominee. Now, we also have to take a look at the socialist candidate, Eugene Debs. He's back. This is like his 3rd or 4th trip on the merry-go-round, by the way. But the Socialist Party, pulls in, I think, like 7 or 8%, which is almost 1 million votes, 900,000 votes. So they're an important factor in terms of maybe upsetting the balance in some states, taking enough votes away from one candidate that it tips that electoral slide a little bit. Eugene Debs believes in, socialism. He believes in collectivism. He believes in the federal government taking a much, much stronger role in having something to do with the equality and workers' rights. And he's certainly being tugged in the Socialist Party by, the IWW and radicals and Big Bill Haywood and some of these guys, and also more conservative socialists who believe in working in the system. Oh, yada, yada, yada. Let's get to the vote. All right, so William Howard Taft is the Republican nominee because he won the convention. And this is a source of contention that Teddy Roosevelt, I think, made him run as a third-party candidate. He originally ran as a Republican. He thought he could win the ticket back. And he did very, very well in the states that had primaries. Remember, the Wisconsin idea, the Bob La Follette idea, who's also running, by the way, for president, isn't complete yet. So many of the delegates that nominate who the candidate's going to be are still inside the political party system. So Howard Taft is going to take advantage of that. And in the eyes of Teddy Roosevelt, he hijacks the convention and he wins the nomination. And then Teddy Roosevelt leaves the convention, all pissed, takes his supporters with him. And really, this might be the end of progressive republicanism, at least within the Republican Party. I think many of those progressives, and especially northern progressives, are going to end up as Democrats real soon. But he storms out and he begins the Progressive Party platform. And the Progressive Party holds their convention in Chicago as well and nominates, of course, Teddy Roosevelt. And he gets the nickname when somebody asked him, I guess, his feelings about the election. He said, "I'm like a bull moose. I'm hardcore. I'm gangsta." So that's the nickname. It's the Bull Moose Party. So here we go, man. We have an election. We have an election with the Democratic nominee, Woodrow Wilson. We have the Republican nominee, the conservative Republican, William Howard Taft, the incumbent, by the way, right? And we also have Teddy Roosevelt, the Bull Moose or progressive candidate, and we have Eugene Debs as the socialist. And I think this is an important election because it's the real first time that it's a campaigned election. I mean, they're out on the road. I think Teddy Roosevelt did something like 10K, like 10,000 miles campaigning. Interesting story, when he was in, I think he was in Milwaukee, he got shot. He got shot, man. And he got shot and hit his glass case, his glasses, where he got his glasses, and landed in like his pocket speech papers. And then he gave the speech. What gangsterhood is that? Gets shot, has a bullet in his chest, gives a 90-minute speech, and he carries the bullet to the day he dies. But at the end of the day, Woodrow Wilson is going to carry all Democrats. Democrats are going to vote for him. The socialist candidate is going to get those 900,000 votes. And
okay, so we're going to stop there with the video. What happens is that between Taft and Roosevelt, they end up splitting the Republican vote. Some people are going to vote Taft, some are going to vote Wilson, or some are going to vote Roosevelt, but all Democrats vote Wilson. So Wilson, as you can see from the chart, from the pie chart here, that Wilson wins the election pretty easily. And poor Taft, you're the incumbent, you're the president who's running for re-election, and it'd be different if he finished a close third, but it wasn't even close. Roosevelt, gets something like 3 to 4 times as many electoral votes as Taft does. And on the flip side, though, losing the election was probably the best thing that happened to Taft. Number one, because literally a year after he's no longer president, he loses all that weight that he gained. That probably literally gave him another 10 to 12 years of life. The other thing is, he ends up becoming Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which is what he had always wanted to do all along. So now we have Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, the New Freedom is the nickname of his domestic policy. These are the programs that Wilson's going to implement to help run the United States. And, one of the things that had happened is that back when Taft was president, he raised tariffs. Boy, that sounds familiar, raising tariffs. That's exactly what our current president is doing. And the problem is, and it's just like we're seeing today, and the same was true over 100 years back in 1913 and 14, is that when you raise tariffs, countries are going to respond accordingly. Well, you're going to charge us more money for sending our goods to your country. Well, we're going to do the same thing to you. We're going to charge your country more money to send goods to us. And back then, just like today, more and more countries, someone sees it and they're like, okay, hey, the United States is raising tariffs. Like today, we're raising tariffs on China. China's going to raise tariffs on us. China's one of the leading importers of U.S. grain. And you know what? Other countries are saying, that's fine. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start schmoozing the Chinese, and we're going to get them to start buying grain for us. It was the same back then. Taft had raised tariffs hoping that it was going to help American business. It actually ended up hurting. So what's one of the first things that Wilson does when he takes office? He creates the Underwood tariff, which lowers tariffs, and the U.S. begins trading with more countries.
I'm gonna call the cops.
Now, a couple other things about Woodrow Wilson. Wilson implemented the 19th Amendment, or I'm sorry, not the 19th Amendment, the 16th Amendment. The 16th Amendment was progressive income tax, which just simply means people are now going to be, the government is going to tax individuals' income, and that's where the government's going to generate the majority of its money. Prior to this, the federal government relied on states to collect taxes, and then the government got the money from the state. The problem was some states are much more densely populated than others, meaning that they have a lot more people living there, and it's easier for those states to come up with the money. And so this just made things, this is supposed to make things a little more equal. But, again, just like we've seen recently, the wealthy have been, the top 1% have actually been getting tax breaks and tax credits since 1916. And the reason is that it's supposed to generate, they're supposed to take that money they're saving and they're supposed to help create more jobs. Unfortunately, that's not really happening.
You might be wondering what all those deductions on your paycheck are. When you're just starting out in the workforce, it's important to learn the difference between gross pay and net pay. Gross pay is what you earn before deductions, like taxes. Net pay is what's left in your check after all the deductions are taken out. So who or what is FICA? It is the Federal Insurance Contributions Act tax, which is comprised of Social Security and Medicare taxes. It's called a payroll tax because it takes money out of employees' paychecks every pay cycle. FICA taxes are currently more than 7.5% of everyone's paycheck until you reach a cap. Employers pay an equal amount of FICA taxes for each employee, and even if you don't pay any income taxes, you still pay FICA taxes. Social Security taxes fund retirement benefits for retired workers, as well as benefits for the disabled and their dependents. The funds received from Medicare, on the other hand, are used to provide medical benefits for certain individuals when they reach age 65. Workers, retired workers, and the spouses of workers and retired workers are eligible to receive Medicare benefits once they reach retirement age. So if you're working, it's your money that helps pay for those benefits. And it's a lot of money, too. In 2015, federal payroll taxes generated $1.07 trillion in revenue for the government, accounting for about 1/3 of all federal tax revenues.
To subscribe to our YouTube channel, click here for more.
Okay, I'm going to stop this here because we're not going to have quite enough time for this video, but there's a part 3, and part 3 you're going to start with watching this video, and then I'm going to make it quick and we're going to get through these notes.